Alright, hey guys, today I'm going to show you guys how to make Go Fish inside of Python. So the first thing we want to do is create the deck of cards. So clearly we got kings, queens, and so on, all the way down to aces, right? Now, in a regular deck of cards, you have about 4 different suits. So once we do this one time, that's not really an entire deck. You would have to do it 4 times for it to be an entire deck of cards. Okay, there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it. 1, 2, 3. So now we have a whole deck. So now I'm going to import a package called random so that we can shuffle the deck. So it doesn't look like that because we need the cards shuffled. So I'm going to say random.shuffle. Then you open up parentheses and put what you're shuffling in. So the deck. So now if I print deck, I forgot the closing parenthesis. That's my bad. You can see that it's not in the same order as which I declared it, which is what we want. So we shuffle the deck. We don't need to see it anymore because we don't want to see it. But since this is Go Fish, we're gonna have I'm gonna do like player 1 and player 2 like the computer. If you want to advance it, by all means. So I'm gonna have player 1 hand, and that's gonna represent the whole entire hand of the player, obviously. And this is gonna be the computer. So player 1 hand is all the cards in their hands. Next, the deck is the deck. So then we're gonna have to check for how many pairs they have, because that could be like their score. So we got player 1 pairs is gonna be 0 at the beginning of the game, and so is the CPU. So now we have all that set up. We can move on. So now we want to actually distribute some cards to each player's hands because they're empty right now. So to give, why can't I type? This is annoying. Give cards to players. Wow, this is just depressing. So give cards to players. So we're going to create actually you could say for card in range. I'm just going to say I. So my caps lock is on. So for loop, it's just going to repeat for the amount of times that's specified in the range. So since I placed the number 5, it's literally going to be 5 times, and that variable I is being created right now, and it can only be accessed in this for loop. After the for loop, it doesn't exist. So now we're going to say that there's a new variable called card, because we want to find the card in the deck, give it to a player, do it 5 times so they get 5 cards. Why an odd number? So that they get too many matches and win it instantly, then there's no game. So now we're going to, well, technically speaking, no, it's fine. So card equals deck, because that's what I call the deck of cards, dot pop. Now what that does is when you have a list, it just removes the last element. So it's called a stack. It's a data structure in programming, or one of the data structures in programming. So card equals deck.pop, and after we've removed the card, all that did was store it in the variable. It didn't do anything else. So I want to say player one hand dot append, because we can't say dot add. Python doesn't know what add means. It's append, but it just does the same thing. So then you can put that variable inside those parentheses, so you know what you're doing. Now we're going to remove this code, but not really. We're just copying it and paste it again. But then we're going to change it to player 2. It's the only difference, because we want to do it for the both hands. So everyone has cards. Pretty simple. Shouldn't have to explain that. Now, I guess you could print welcome to Go Fish. So then do a line break. Now, before the game starts, you have to make sure there's no duplicates in their hands already. And if there is, you got to remove them and give those pair points. So that's what we're going to do now. Check for duplicates. So I'm going to create a function to check for this. So I'm going to put it right here. Looks like a good spot. So to create a function, you have to say def, basically stands for define. Then you got to give it a name. I'm going to say check for pairs. And given the hand, that's been taken in. And that's the syntax. So I'm going to create points. I'm going to set that equal to 0. Oh boy. Then we're going to do for card in hand, because hand is going to be like player 1 hand or player 2 hand. I'm just calling it hand. So for card in hand, we're going to say if hand.count card is greater than 1, we're going to remove the pair. Why? Because that means there's more than one of those. .count is counting how many cards there are in the hand. So there you go. So hand.remove card twice, because it's a pair. They have 2 of them. Then I want to add 1 to the total of points. And I'm going to return points, because that's what's going to come in at the end of the function when we call it. Now the reason we were returning points, so at the end of the function when you call it, it gives it out, is because we're going to add it to the variables that we have up here, so it makes it easier. So basically we set the function up, pretty simple, wasn't complicated. So player 1 pairs is going to equal. You could do plus equal, it doesn't really matter because it's already 0. So I'm just going to say equal, and then you have to call the function you named, and I did this. Now, you don't type hand, because I called hand here, because that's the name it's going to be called in the function. Here, check for pairs for player 1 hand. And then player 2 pairs equals check for pairs player 2 hand. So now that we checked for duplicates, we can start our game loop. So I'm just going to put in a while true and break out of it once the game's over. You could always do like a boolean or something if you really wanted to. So while true, we're going to say if the length of the player's hand is less than 1, or player 2's hand is less than 1, we are going to break, because that means game over. If nobody has any cards left, that's less than 1, which is no more cards. So then, if that's not the case, we don't break and we continue down in our code. Therefore, it'll reach this another while, which is going to be they can keep asking for a card. Like, if you say 2, your player has a 2, then you get to go again. So you're going to keep going again until you have to go fish. So, while true again, because it's just kind of easy. This may not the best way all the time, but right now it works. So I'm going to tell them what cards they have, otherwise they won't be able to know what to choose from. So it's like, hey, here are your cards. Do a space because the computer's very petty. Oh, I'm sorry. You have to do a comma because we're not printing strings together. And this is Python. Player 1, hand. So then I'm going to say wanted card, right? Because you have to choose one. And then we want their input. We want them to type something in. So it automatically takes it as a string, so we don't have to alter it because we want it as a string. All the cards are strings right now. That's why they're in quotation marks. So what card do you wish for? Or however you want to phrase that, you know? What card do you want? That sounds rude, but whatever. So then line break. Crap. Line break has to go inside quotations. Alright, so after you print wanted card, we have to check if that very wanted card is actually in the opponent's hand. Otherwise, they go fish or not. So if wanted card is in player 2 hand, now I'm talking English while I'm typing the Python because this is we have to talk computer, but I'm trying to talk to you guys to explain what we're doing for the computer. So we're going to say good job, so they know, because you have to talk to them so much, they don't know what's going on. Only the computer does. So unless you type it in the console with a print, they're not going to receive any acknowledgement. So I'm going to be like, hey, good job. That means you actually got something. And then we're going to remove it. Remember, you got to do it twice. This time, we're doing it twice in a different way. Twice as in one from player 2, because you're not checking for a duplicate that has a pair. You're checking to make sure someone has one card while you have the other. So player 1 hand dot remove wanted card, and then the other way around as well. And then we have to add to player 1's pairs because they clearly made a pair, right? And then continue because since they get to go again. Now if this was not the case, we're going to do an else. So we're going to say print so they know what's going on again. Go fish. That means you had to draw a card. And then we have to make them draw that card because we are the programmers. So deck.pop, right? That way you don't add extra cards and you're losing the cards as you play the game. And then we would break so that we get out of that loop to go back into this one, which would then check when right now this is the point that we would do the CPU's turn. So that while loop is wrapped around player 1 only. So then we will have another one just for player 2, which is what we'll write for you now. But before we do that, we also have to make sure that we check for the pairs again since they just drew a card. So the fact that they just drew a card, we're going to have to say player 1 pairs again is equal. Well, actually, plus equal this time, because now we're actually in the game loop, so we don't want to reset it. We just want to add to it. And then the function we made earlier, check for pairs, player 1 hand, because we're in the player 1 hand, players 1's pairs. Oof, tongue twisters. Alright, so now we can do what I was saying. So I'm going to do another while true. And instead, the card choice won't be chosen because it's a computer. We're just going to make it random. So we can call our random package again, and there is this, dot choice. It randomly selects something from a list. So you can literally just say deck. Well, not deck. Sorry, player 2 hand, because we can't choose from the deck. We choose a random card from our hand and decide that's the one we want to look for. So then we're going to tell the player who's playing. So player 2 asked for, and then you tell them because it's in the variable. So then player 2 asked for that card. So then you have to check if it's in player 1's hand, and if it's not, go fishing, and then check the pairs again, and then you're pretty much done. So, of course, I'll finish it, but print player 2 asked for. Kind of just lost where I was. Oh, right, if statement. So we're checking. It's in there, right? If card choice is in player 1 hand, we will remove it. Card choice. And then we have to do that. Player 2 hand, right? And then we can add 1, continue. Oops, that's a quotation mark. So then we do their else. It's the same thing as the player we just did, like right up here. But for here, it's just for the computer. So you just change a few things. You could have even copied and pasted it and like altered it if you wanted to save some time. So print player 2 had to go fishing, because again we're talking to the player. They should be updated on what's going on in the game that they are playing. Since we're only doing it in the console, they don't have a visual going on. So we have to constantly be telling them and talking to them. So print player 2 had to go fishing, and then you're clearly going to make him go fishing. So player 2 hand dot append deck dot pop. Done that. Boop, boop. Alright, so then we want to break because he doesn't get to go again. We're in a wild true. We'll just loop forever unless we tell it so. So now we get out of there again. And we want to say player 2 pairs. Remember, we're checking for those. Since he drew again, we don't know if he got a pair. That's not being taken out. So then we say player 2 hand. Check for pairs. So now to make it really perfect, you go all the way to the end right there, because that would be out of all of our while loops. And that would mean the game is over, because we're only going to be out of this while true if either of them have won the game by having no more cards left. So when you go here, you can say this is game over, right? Therefore, print game over, and then do some line breaks. Scores, line break. Player 1. Player 1 pairs. And then print player 2 pairs. Alright, so you run the game. It says, hey, welcome to Go Fish. Here are your cards. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And none of them are the same. That worked out. So we're like, alright, well, I want a king. It's like, alright, well, I got a king. He happened to have one. And guess what? 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm not gonna keep running because it could be here all day. I don't know how long it's gonna last, but clearly it works. That's the code. It's about 124 lines, give or take with spaces, and most of it's from this being really long. But that's it. If you have any questions, there's the comment section below, and I hope you guys had fun.